Okay, now we're a couple of minutes past the start time, so I think I'm going to make a start. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar towards an integrated research management digital ecosystem. I think this webinar has its origins in a meeting that I did with, that we ran with ARMA last year, where there was quite a lot of interest and exasperation in around the use of digital technology and research management and the difficulties that a lot of research managers have. So hopefully this webinar may not be providing solutions, but it may be sort of focusing in on the problems a bit more, and also starting to share what individuals and institutions are doing to try to progress in this space. Slide. So just for those of you who don't know who JISC are, very quickly, we're a UK membership organisation providing digital products and services for the UK higher education, further education and skills sector. We provide shared digital infrastructure and services such as the Janet network. We broker sector deals with IT vendors and publishers, and we provide advice and guidance. And all of our work is underpinned by research and development. So we develop new and emerging digital products and services for the sector. So why are we here today? Well, if you're attending today, I'm assuming that you have an interest in the management of research information and the application of digital technology to this. You use or have an interest in CRISes, repositories, software for grants, contracts, ethics and impact. And you're also aware that some of other important information is stored elsewhere, such as in finance systems, HR systems, student systems, and also externally in funder systems, the REF systems, publishers and scholarly comms services. So ideally, I think we'd all like connected workflows where information and digital files flow through a connected network of systems and services, pretty much unhindered except for privacy and copyright concerns, of course. Unfortunately, too many of us are still facing challenges of disjointed workflows due to system and information incompatibility. Other people would welcome access to public information that's stored elsewhere in other systems and is just not accessible. And these challenges are not just only faced by people in universities, but also funders, government agencies and other sector bodies. All of us feel the pain of incompatibility. So it's a long time ago now, it seems a long time ago, that we heard the mantra, first heard the mantra, enter once, use many times, but it still feels a long way off. So we need an integrated research management digital ecosystem. So what would make up such a thing? Well, key elements, I would say, are the hardware and the software, obviously, and the services that are built on top of that. So these services are provided by the sector, provided by government and non-profit organisations, and also the commercial bodies as well. Also important, all the institutions are involved. So obviously the universities and other research performing institutions, but also national institutions such as funders, government, and other sector bodies such as JISC, and also the international organisations and initiatives such as EOSC and Eurocris. We need standards in metadata and vocabularies. We need identifiers and we need protocols. We need some kind of cohesion and standardization across the policies. And we need people. We need people with the right skills and experience, and we also need people to interact with one another and share their perspectives and help everybody understand where everybody's work fits in. So why is this so hard? Well, it's not new. I was a research manager for 13 years, and it was a constant battle. When I first joined JISC in about 2015, one of the first pieces of work I was involved in was trying to map research software used by different stakeholders for different purposes. That you don't need to see the detail of this, but it's really just showing that there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of purposes, and a lot of different systems. I was also involved in trying to map the UK bodies. This is 2017, I think. The sector bodies just in the UK who have an interest in research information management. So we've got multiple systems, we've got multiple stakeholders, we've got multiple workflows, we've got multiple everything. It's a massive problem. So how do we solve it? So I'll leave that question there and just tell you who has very kindly agreed to come along and talk about these issues to you all today. Well, probably apart from Anne from UKRI, has to head off quite soon after her talk. So we will, she'll be up first. She's the director of the Simple and Better Funding Programme for UKRI, and probably dealing with all the problems within one institution that I've just highlighted. So she's going to talk about that work. And then we'll take a few questions after that. We won't be able to take too many because time's tight. But for all the other speakers, we're going to do questions at the end. So Sue's going to talk about some of the challenges that Royal Holloway have faced in this area. Donna's going to talk about some work that UCL have done about mapping their systems so they can really understand all the workflows that they have in such a large institution, a very big piece of work. Lindsay's going to talk about integrating Chris into workflows, Adam Napier, and Adam, who I work with at JISC, my colleague, he's going to talk about the importance of identifiers in this space. And then I'll give you an overview of what JISC provides in this area afterwards. So without any further delay, I'm going to stop sharing and invite Anne to talk to us about what she's doing at UKRI.
Good morning. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see the screen itself, the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, thank you, Anne.
Excellent. Okay, great. Let's start at the beginning. Okay, so good morning. My name is Anne Fields, and I'm Program Director for the Simple and Better Funding Program. It's a major program of work that's looking at our systems, processes, and services that we provide on behalf of UKRI to all our external and internal users. To give you some background on the Simple and Better Funding Program, its scope is pretty much anything that is end-to-end within our system, from application, pre-application to post-award monitoring, and everything in between. It includes a new system that unifies our current existing systems in the plural. It looks at policy and trying to unify and codify a bit more consistently our policy across UKRI. It looks at processes and services that we provide, with an idea that we try to unify wherever possible, because we are one organization now, and we understand the frustrations of many users, applicants, peer reviewers, research offices, etc., who come to our systems for wearing different hats, maybe come in through different routes, and every time it feels like you're relearning a system or a service, which doesn't seem very good. I can give you the history. I'm sure you know it if you've been around long enough. Before UKRI, we were 9 independent organizations, the 7 research councils, Researching Women and Innovate UK. And so we did have different processes, systems, policies, etc. But as UKRI, that doesn't quite make so much sense anymore. So our aim is to understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve, what success would look like with that problem, and then create a solution that works for as many people as possible. The root of that is a new system to replace GES. That's the first system that we will replace with our funding service, then Innovate and Research England. Okay, so the other part of this, to give it some greater context, is the independent review to UK research bureaucracy, sponsored by BEIS and led by Professor Adam Tickell, VC of Sussex. We're very excited about this. It means that UKRI doesn't have to or won't work in silo and just look at ourselves. Adam's review is looking at bureaucracy, not just from UKRI and not just from funders, but also from universities themselves and from government departments, including BEIS. So it's a broad brush review that looks at sort of how research or bureaucracy has come into the system, why it was needed, is it still needed, and what we might do to reduce it. I think it's fair to say that we won't get rid of bureaucracy, that there's some good foundational reasons for having a bit, but you could probably appreciate, particularly now in the world of better data and better information, better flows and better systems, that we probably don't need the level of bureaucracy that we've created. And some of it may not be relevant anymore, even though it might have been valid at the time. You can also appreciate that bureaucracy tends to be added to and never taken away. So it gets very confusing, the landscape. So we're really excited because that allows us to work across the ecosystem and try to assure that we're not reducing bureaucracy in UKRI only to transfer it somewhere else in the system. So we're pretty, as I say, excited to work with Adam. He's been very generous and gracious. He's invited me to a lot of the workshops that he's been holding, and we speak with him monthly. I have a meeting with him every month that keeps us in tune. His report should have some interim findings in the fall 2021 and conclusions in early 2022. So we look forward to seeing what those are. Within UKRI specifically, in September 2020, we published 13 priority areas that we wanted to reduce bureaucracy in, and you can broadly categorize those into three. One is selection and assessment processes, assurance and capturing outcomes, and the broader systems and activities that support grants and funding processes. Working right to left, if you like, we always, as Tamsin already mentioned, we're very interested in only collecting data once, reusing it often. That's a complicated untangling of how we use it. It's what we really need to do is understand why we collect the information, who needs it and when do they need it, and what do they use it for. So it's a really kind of back to basics fundamental question that we're asking every time we produce new elements of our system. We are constantly asked questions such as those. Moving on to simplified outcomes monitoring and reporting. There's two sides to this coin, if I can put it that way. One of the early wins that we're trying to do is reduce a bit of and streamline a bit of the research fish question set. I think that's fair to say. I've got some good news and bad news with regards to outcomes collection more broadly. So outcomes collection and the question about whether or not research fish or the way that it is structured fits our current needs is not in scope of my program. So research fish itself, right, and its structure is not in scope. What is in scope is a more fundamental question about what do we use the information for, why do we collect it, and how do we use it? Now, I think it's fair to say that it's absolutely imperative that UKRI and other funders have impact data and outcomes collection. We won't be able to describe the value that UKRI, or the value that that the public receives from investing in research if we don't have that kind of information. So we know that it's really important. But there are questions about, well, what kind of stories are we trying to tell? What kind of information do we need? Can we have comparability and consistency across other funders as well? So that talks about interoperability, et cetera. So really kind of asking some more fundamental questions about, well, what is the story we're trying to tell, and therefore what information do we need to tell it? And then the second order question is research fish, or the structure that we have presently, the right solution to answer that problem? So that very much that former discovery piece of work is very much in scope of the program. But I don't think we can talk about whether or not the system is correct until we've done the earlier piece of work. And then finally, moving on to the other thing I highlighted is the new service based on a new digital platform, which I'll get onto in a moment. So the service that we're building, it is an agile program. It's not going to be waterfall. We are building and testing as we go. The aim of that service is to make it easier. It says here for applicants, but it's true to say that it's based on being easier for users of the system, regardless of how you integrate with the system. So however you use it, it's meant to be easier. You shouldn't have to learn it every time you touch the system, as I mentioned earlier. Instructions for what you're expected to do should be on screen. There should be live reporting so that you can see statuses a lot better. There'll be better data interoperability, etc. I think it's fair to say, again, the data interoperability, you won't see that first off because we're still building, in a sense, the foundation and the platform of the system itself. But we very much know that it's part of the requirement for us. And we're doing a lot of work in this space, along with GISC, which I'll get onto in a moment, about data interoperability, which is happening in parallel. So the Simpler and Better Funding Program last year piloted our first call, which was the AHRC New Gen Thinkers scheme. So that was it's a very small and in a sense simplified scheme. It's one of the most simple schemes that UKRI operate, which is why it was the first to go live. We're running it again in this year. And as I mentioned, we'll gradually extend the scope and the capability of the service. And the more that we build, the more complex funding opportunities are going to come on stream into the funding service, with the idea that we wind down our existing legacy system in time. So eventually everything will be going through the new funding service. So we think that there are some key benefits of this new way of working and the technology platform that we are delivering for organizations. And I've listed some of those on the screen. So early visibility of applications, better access rights, both internally and externally to the research organization, better dashboards showing progress, notifications of decisions, visibility of feedback, etc. So we really are taking a lot of the feedback that we've had about the problems of our current system and trying to incorporate solutions and better ways of working into the new system. And one of the things I wanted to also point out is the work that GISC has been doing regarding building consensus with things like persistent identifiers such as ORCID. And they have been facilitating this across a number of stakeholders to seek a more strategic adoption of things like priority PIDs, such as organizational IDs, grant IDs, funding IDs, object IDs, etc. UKRI has been closely engaged with this work to build consensus and buy-in, to have a shared cross-stakeholder approach. And we recognize the value that this will be gained the more that those PIDs are adopted in concert and in scale across stakeholders. So we're really excited. As I say, you won't see this in the early months of the funding service, but we are working in parallel with GISC to understand what those needs are. And then as we build the system, adopt those standardizations, if you like. So GISC is leading on this National PID Consortium, and for that, we're very grateful because it really just helps us make sure that we deliver a system at the very start that's going to work for a length of time in the future. So we also have, as I mentioned, an external API strategy for the exchange of data. You won't, as I say, you won't see that right in the beginning, but it is our ambition to make sure that we include that as we build more complexity into the system. You might say, again, the downside is that the potential is that you'll be running applications through two systems, our current legacy system, GES, and the new system called the funding service, as we build and design and develop that as we go. But the good news about doing that is that it isn't a waterfall process. You won't be handed one big bang and see it only to realize it doesn't fit your needs. So as we go stream, we do a lot of user research and user testing before we start, and we do a number of feedback and capturing of users' experience once the system goes live. We learn from that, and then we adapt and build and continually improve as we go. So with that in mind, I wanted to then move on about engagement and some of our engagement strategy. So it's the very people who work with our systems, both internally and externally, which are at the heart of the design of the changes that we want to make. We engage in consultations, we do workshops, we do user research and testing. We want to co-create solutions with our users. It's very important to us. We want to test those solutions to make sure that they work, refine, and improve as we go. So with that in mind, if anybody is interested, and that's a little plea out here, if anybody is interested in participating either in user research or more broad consultations, there are two ways to get in touch with us. These slides will be shared after this workshop, so you're very welcome to be able to get access to these if you don't want to write it down. So one is the email address, which is sbf@ukri.org, and there's another survey that we put out. I think it collects far more information about the kind of thing that you're interested in feeding into in order to develop the service. You might be a research officer, or you might be working in the finance department, and you have some strong feelings about how we manage finance data, or how we collect impact data, or whatever. And so the survey just sort of hones in on your particular interest and area of expertise. So we highly encourage you, if you're interested, to get involved and to reach out to us, because that's the only way we'll learn and improve. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening to me. I am sorry I have to leave a little bit early, but Tamsin has very kindly accommodated my need. And if you have any questions, I believe we'll take them. But for now, I'll just hand over to Tamsin, and I'll stop sharing that. So thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Anne. That's fascinating and very reassuring for all of us who've been at the other end of managing grants. We have got one question's come in. I'm not sure if you answered it actually at the latter end of your talk. I'll just read it out. When GES was originally set up, RC UK consulted with all the universities to set up roles and processes. Will there be a chance to look at this again for this new system and perhaps make better decisions about where approval or submission sits, for example?
I think the short, I don't know the detail, but I think the short answer is yes. You might appreciate that UKRI has been working on a new digital platform for some time. And we have a lot of user testing, a lot of user data, but we always go back. We don't just rely on something that we collected some years ago, because we know that the world has moved on and things have changed. And particularly in the context of RC UK, when it was sort of the friendly body, if I can put it that way, sitting across the independent research councils, the needs possibly were very different to UKRI, which is one organization as opposed to 7 independent or 9 independent bodies. So I think I would be surprised if we didn't have another look at it.
Yeah, okay. So another question's just come in this also relates really to the fact that that you've become one organization. So will the individual funders' research data policies expectations be merged and superseded by one single UKRI research data policy?
Oh, that's a good question. Funnily enough, research data policies are not within my remit. I'm mostly working on grant funding policies. There's a data team with the data strategy. But I would imagine, again, we are looking to see, we call it unified by default. So we're looking to see where we can make sense of things and why the additionality or the optionality, if I can put it that way, exists. And really, rather than looking at it from right to left, if I could put it that way. So what's the solution? We're really trying to look at, well, what's the problem from left to right? What's the problem those policies were trying to address? What is the outcome, therefore, they were trying to ensure that they made? And then what might the solution be? So I've seen a lot of work within UKRI where we tend to start with the solution. And then as soon as we do that, other parts of the businesses, but that solution won't work for me for very good reasons. So rather than looking at the problem, rather than looking at the solution, I would much rather start with the problem first. Yeah. So I would expect that the data team will be doing much of a similar thing and trying to unify, because if we can't unify, I would say broadly and simplistically speaking, if we can't unify within UKRI, then it'll be very difficult for us to interoperate across the system and across the ecosystem.
Exactly. And just as a follow-up, there was a request for a single template for data management plans, but hopefully that will be.
Yes.
Right, I'm just, we've got one more question, and then we really are going to have to move on, unfortunately. But is there an online resource or policy document that sets out the standardized identifiers that UKRI and JISC have been building consensus on? I think actually that's going to be a question for Adam to answer later. You're off the hook on that one, I think. And that was fascinating. Thank you so much. And I think what I like about this one going first is that it's not just concentrating on systems. You know, this really shows that everything else around this ecosystem, you know, the people and the policies and everything is important. It's not just the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Now we have got Sue from Royal Holloway.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I will attempt to share my screen. Make sure I'm sharing the right one. Can everybody see that, hopefully?
Yes, thank you, Sue.
Excellent, good. Thank you very much, Tamsin. So my name is Sue Starbuck. I'm Head of Research Services at Royal Holloway. So I have quite a wide remit, but within that remit comes research systems. And I attended the ARMA workshop that Tamsin referred to in her introduction and was very vocal at that workshop, which is presumably why I was asked to come and take part in this. I have been involved in procuring a couple of systems, and we're still in the process of procuring a couple of systems. So what I'm going to talk about is that, from my perspective, some of the issues that we have encountered. So let's move on. Oops. So in an ideal world, as Tamsin's already said, we would have perfect systems that talk to each other, that are easy to use, have configurable workflows, attractive front ends for users, wonderful reporting tools that move and adapt with the times without any problems and cater for everyone's need. But we all know that we're not living in an ideal world. What we're more likely to get is this. And interestingly, Tamsin and I had very similar photos about what the systems we have are like at the moment. So it's not a complete mess. We've got some things that are very good. We've got some things that are not so good. But there's a lot of confusion and a lot of issues that we have to face. So I was thinking about the challenges that I faced. This is me thinking about how I should procure some new systems. And when I was thinking about the talk, I decided I would put those challenges into 4 areas. So I shall look at those challenges one at a time. The first one is understanding what you want. It seems to be a no-brainer, but it's really important to take a step back and think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. And this is not just at the beginning, but as you're working through thinking about the new systems that you need to procure. And I think one of the issues, certainly for me, when I got into a more further into the process, is that we had to become more and more detailed. And as you become more detailed, the muddier your thoughts become. By concentrating on the detail, which has to be done, I'm not saying it doesn't have to be done, you can, if you're not careful, the focus of what you're doing can be taken away. And one of the reasons for that, moving on to my second challenge, is really looking at what other people want. We all know about stakeholder management. I'm not going to talk about that, but what you have got your view of your system. What happens is that other people will need to interact with these systems, other systems need to interact with these systems. So the first challenge for me is that although it's my system, other people need to use that system, and that means things can change. There may be within your university priorities, IT priorities that you're unaware of. There may be a priority to, I don't know, move to a cloud-based solution, or your IT department may have a priority to reduce the number of platforms that things are working on. All these can affect what you are looking for. You may be looking for a very functional system, but your senior management team wants pretty graphs and diagrams on the website to show off the research of the institution. And there will always be changing external requirements. And that, again, causes problems with what you're looking for as you move through the process. My final, and apologies to anyone who works in procurement, you will be drawn into the murky world of procurement. And if you've never worked on a sort of big procurement, it is quite a headache. There are many regulations change, and processes within your college change. So those are my second challenge. My third challenge was understanding what was out there. And this is where I got very dispirited at one point, because you've got to be realistic. No system does exactly what you want it to do. And there are good things and there are bad things about all systems. A system that works best for you may not be the best for other stakeholders. And you have to remember that suppliers are running, the suppliers of systems are running a business, and they will have a core product, and the other modules tend not to get the same level of development, which means that you may be looking for a whole package, but one supplier doesn't give you the same level of on each of those modules within that package. And so it doesn't always make sense to take one service. I mean, things like if you're looking for, one of the things we've been looking at is a new costing and pricing tool with the workflow. And one of the questions was, do we want our contracts people to be involved in that? And we do want a new system for storing and looking at contracts. And sometimes some of the suppliers will have a contracts module, but that might not actually fit the needs of your contracts department. So, as I say, the third challenge is understanding what's out there and being realistic about that. Which brings me to my fourth challenge, which is, if I can actually click on it, the compromise. It's always difficult to compromise, but you have to think you are unlikely to get exactly what you want. You will always, unless you're very lucky and you're setting everything up from scratch, have to work around legacy systems. And however much you might want to change what you do, people outside your team that you're working with, finance or the library or whatever, may be perfectly happy with what they've got at the moment, and they may not want to work with your new system. And another thing that I have encountered was the need to negotiate internal costs, certainly internal IT costs, which it just didn't occur to us originally when we were starting out that is as big a problem as negotiating external costs. So you will also have to navigate internal politics. And one of the key things that I discovered over the months I was doing this was that what you think initially are minor stakeholders can become major stakeholders. And that's something you have to struggle with. And, bearing in mind that I've been doing all this much of the time, there has been a global pandemic. You've got to relax and go with the flow, really, because these things cannot be beaten, but they cause their own problems. So moving on from that, moving forward, you've actually got to move forward. And I put here the hardest part of moving forward isn't looking back. And I think that's really key, because you can't start regretting what you haven't got. You've actually got to move with what you can get and what you have. And this is where I was thinking, and really interesting that both Tamsin and Anne have mentioned the people involved. We're talking about systems here, but systems are operated by people. People interact with those systems all the time. And one of the things that I do is work with academics on things like collaborating on research projects. In fact, I've co-authored a book for ECRs and PGRs on inspiring collaboration and engagement. And in that, we're talking about techniques for collaborating with others and pitfalls, problems, that kind of thing. So it's really important when you're talking about systems to remember that you are actually working with people, and the ideas, the principles behind collaboration are extremely important in getting any kind of good system going, and designing your system, and also working with all their stakeholders. And one of the things we put in our book, with what we devised the 7 C's of collaborative behaviour. And this works for people working on research grants, it works for people working on publications, it also works for you if you are thinking about procuring any kind of research system. You need to be compassionate, committed, curious, candid, creative, constructivist, and able to manage uncertainty. And I think those are 7 overriding principles, which, if I'd thought about it originally, I should have considered at the beginning of our procurement processes, because they're really key to making sure that everything works properly. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Fascinating, thank you, Sue. I think anybody who's going into a procurement round needs to read that book and take on your advice. It's very, very helpful. Thank you, Sue.
No problem.
We're now going to move to Donna, who's going to talk about a lot of pre-procurement work that they've had to do at UCL in terms of reviewing all the systems that they have and what they did and learnt.
Yes, so hopefully you can see my screen. I'm just going to try and get it into full sharing mode. Can you see that?
That's fine. Thank you, Donna.
Okay, yeah, so hi, yeah, I'm Donna Swan. I've got a couple of hats that I hold at UCL, but one of them is Head of Research IT Applications. So I work within the Central IT Department, known as ISD. And over the last couple of years, we've been working towards understanding our research IT management systems. And we've done an architectural review. And one of the drivers for us really was to understand how we were supporting open science now and in the future. So I'm going to talk you through what we did, what we've learned, and some of the next steps. So like I say, the project's been running for about 2 or 3 years now. The scope of the project was really to review those current research IT applications, to engage with the UCL's research community and really start to understand how those systems were being used, whether they were aligned or not aligned, as you'll see, with open science principles and practices, and really start to look at any of those issues, any gaps and opportunities that would really help to look at where the future of research management applications will be for UCL. So a little bit of background to this. Like I say, around 2018, we started this, and the scope at that point was around research outputs and profile systems. Here at UCL, we have a research applications portfolio, and really it's kind of like anything to do with research management is kind of sits in this bucket. So in 2019, we increased that scope to look at some of the systems that support our PGR students as well. And this is around sort of project management and skills development. So it grew and grew, this project. I'm going to, for today's talk, really kind of concentrate more on the research outputs and profiles. There was also other pieces of work or programs of work happening at the same time. So we had a large program looking at transforming our professional services, looking at improving our research and innovation support. So looking beyond just sponsored research. So that group was looking at sort of WorkTribe, Axiom and Tableau for reporting. And also we've had a lot of discussions with new research institutes. In particular, we've got the Dementia Research Institute about to launch in 2024. And we're really looking at understanding how do we support all of the sort of research operational activities. So there's a lot going on. So one of the things we've really had to try to do as a group is to align what we're doing with each other, so that we know what's going on. And of course, in terms of REF, we were our stakeholders made it very clear that what they didn't want was any changes to our research management systems until we submitted to REF. Now, obviously, back in 2018, we thought that was going to be sooner than it was. So we were delayed, obviously, in being able to do anything with this review, but actually it gave us more time to have more discussions with the research communities. So what inputs did we have to this project? So one of the first things, and it was interesting what Sue said earlier, was around we really wanted to have a vision for where we were trying to get to in terms of around our open science strategy. We felt that it would really help us to know what we wanted to do. And I'll talk you through a very high level, but that was co-created very early on in the project with Paul Eris, who's the Pro-Vice Provost of UCL's library, who's our sort of resident expert with regards to open science, and also the project team. So we've also did quite a bit of academic consultation. So there were lots of interviews, started off firstly with our faculty deans, really trying to understand what it was that they wanted from research outputs and profiles, but also extended that to things like open access, bibliometrics, and then started to work with our academics, also our professional services staff. Like I say, a big piece of this work was really to understand how we were doing in terms of aligning our services with open science. So we held a lot of workshops to really see how those principles were supported currently. And again, those were made up of professional services staff and academic staff. And each year we run a satisfaction survey out of our department, which is known as RITS over here in ISD, and we took those findings as well to input into this project. The main output from this project has been a 80-page document which looks at all of the work that we've done and looks at all of the capabilities that we want from our research management systems in the future, and with a set of recommendations. But there were some key pieces of work that came out of the project. We did a market research piece. We looked at reviewing what was available on the market, and we've also looked and done an online review of what other universities were doing in this space. We did a lot of work around our high-level business, our high-level design. So we looked at what we currently have today, and we looked at all our dependencies. We then started to look at problem statements, and we did a lot of talking with, like I say, our research communities. We started to understand what were the problems with our current systems, and we started to think about what we'd like to do and have as capabilities in the future. We started to look at the UCISA capability model and also that open science vision I talked about earlier to see how we could map those. And we also did quite a large gap analysis piece of work. So we looked at all of our research applications and we mapped them against the open science principles and identified any gaps. So what does that look like? So in terms of our open science vision, it was really clear from us at the very start. Like I said, we wanted to really know what it was that we wanted to achieve so that we could make sure that we were kind of on track. And we came up with sort of 4 key areas. And this was to ensure that we delivered excellence so that we've got a complete picture of our results and impact. And that those around the world can actually see those achievements. So we wanted to make sure that we could record and measure all of those research outputs and publications. We wanted to make them accessible so that everybody could see and search for them. We wanted to make sure that we had a richness of data, so we had valuable data, and through our sort of systems integration, and also make sure that we could assist researchers in providing what were the clear benefits of doing this. So here's our sort of high-level design of our current systems here at UCL, and I think it was something that Tamsin talked about earlier, which was around the amount of research systems or applications that we were supporting centrally, which you'll see here in the blue. Then we've got a lot of internal UCL systems that we're trying to integrate with. And we've also got external systems, and I suppose you could also say that we've got the funder systems that aren't on this picture. But you'll see that some of our systems are integrated, some of them aren't, so they're sitting as silos. And we really started to sort of drill down into what issues there were with the system set up as it currently sits today. We also then took those research applications and we started to see how we're now, how we were sort of doing against the 8 pillars of open science. It came, it wasn't all bad. Some of our systems were able to fulfill some of those principles and practices, but we could see that there were definitely some gaps across our research applications. So what did we learn from that work? Well, quite a bit has been covered, I think, in some of these discussions already today, but there isn't a defined data model here at UCL. So it's been really difficult to understand where the data sits. We've got some of it held centrally, some of it locally. And as people say, if you can't see what your data is, it's really difficult then to manage that. We've got integration issues and multiple dependencies. That's upstream and downstream with our services. We've got lots of different groups within UCL and in ISD managing different services. And so when changes on one system can obviously affect another system downstream. So we really need to be really clear on what we're trying to achieve and also have really good communication and collaborative working with those other teams. Duplication of data, definitely we were seeing across our systems, and issues with data quality, missing data. Our systems are a mixture of SaaS solutions on premise, some in the cloud, but also we've got quite a lot of our systems that have been homegrown and built over the last 10, 15 years. So we have a lot of difficulty in updating those systems. It's really time consuming. And as we're moving forward, the more updates of those systems, the more technical debt that we're creating. There was also a lot of duplication of functionality across our system or services. So we were finding that actually we've got systems that are sort of coupled together, and we'd find the same functionality in one service and in another. And we were also finding that a lot of our systems, some of our systems were sitting on the same architecture, which meant that we've got problems with database space and server performance. So what we then did was we went out to our users and we started to ask them, okay, so what problems do we have with our research applications, and what would we like the desired capability to be in the future? And we've got quite a lot of them in the document that I spoke about earlier, but I've tried to pull out some of those problem statements and what it is that our UCL research communities want in the future. So we found that quite a lot felt that some of our systems had a very basic look and feel to them. Some of our systems were quite clunky, difficult to use, especially our UCL's research profile system, which is an in-house built. So one of the desired capabilities here was to make sure that we can showcase our research expertise and outcomes. And there was quite a sense that people would like to act it as like a researcher CV for external audiences. It would also help provide funders and funding panels with a certified record of what researchers are doing and their achievements. We also have multiple systems to manage outputs, including metadata, and consequence of this is duplication of data. So we'd really like in the future to see that we manage our UCL inputs through a single user interface. Whether that's possible or not will be to be seen. But it was really clear that people wanted to provide a single point of entry for all their deposits, rather than what we have currently, which are multiple systems to do this. There was also the ability for researchers to record their outputs, deposits, and comply with funder requirements, and just have support for a greater diversity of research outputs. In particular, we found that, and with the changes to some emphasis around what REF in the future will be looking at, in particular software as an output, it was felt that here at UCL we've got lots of systems, none of those that are centrally supported, where people are depositing their software. So what we would like to do in the future is have a way of creating and storing and sharing open source software as a research output. There was manual processes for managing metadata, deposits and embargoes, and a lack of discoverability in other systems. So we'd really like to see automated processes for maintaining data, but also the support for discoverability in other systems, including those other repositories and aggregation services. The quality of data, there's inconsistent, incorrect data in systems. So what we'd like to see is a lot more work done around harvesting information from our external systems, better system-driven quality control processes in place, but still allowing our users to be able to edit their data and profiles. Although there is an uptake of ORCID and is very good here at UCL within our research publication system, there seems to be a lack of understanding of how we could utilise that across the life cycle. So we'd really like to see more support of the use of ORCID, integrate this into our key research workflows, and extending this to other systems, including our repositories, and exploit ORCID's linking functionality. There was also issues around obtaining public engagement and public policy dimension of our research is often complex and difficult to obtain. So we'd really like to capture and surface our public engagement and policy dimensions, including grand challenges, and this would really sit within our research strategy. Now, this was just a kind of flavour of some of the problem statements we came up. We came up with about, I'd say, 20 different problem statements, and this will then build the desired capabilities for our future systems. So a quick overview, what is it that UCL wants from their research management systems in the future? We really want a comprehensive system, one that fully supports REF submissions and other frameworks and compliance, an integrated solution. It was very clear that we wanted to be able to have all our research outputs, impacts and profiles in one place, a single point of entry, the ability to plan, track and manage impact. That's something that we don't do very well at the moment here at UCL. The ability to maintain public-facing research profiles, but also be able to exchange and easily make use of information between our systems, have a robust and easily maintained system, so this concept of a single source of truth. Also, quite a few of our stakeholders want access to that information management information so that we can build and visualize and use analytical tools, and also to have use of our data across the UCL systems, so that we can then easily use this and transfer it to things like our funders. So recommendations and next steps for us. What we really want to do is to understand and further utilise some of the capabilities of our current CRIS, which means that we'll be reducing some of our homegrown applications. We're really using, looking at our IT strategy, which is to modernise and to move towards the cloud. So we'd like to, I say, further utilise our CRIS and to think about using some of those other modules that are available to us. So over the coming months, we'll start to see where that will take us to. We want to continue to align the work that we're doing with other programs of work across UCL. So I talked about earlier, so we've got a holistic view of all of the work that's going on. We're moving to a more agile approach to delivery here in UCL. So one of the next steps for us really will be to start to define what do those products look like? What's the vision for them? What teams will be supporting them? And what governance do we need to have to ensure that we get future funding in this space? We'll be running this as a program of work, and we'll also then be looking at lots of the process, policies and workflows around this. And we'll just keep talking to our research communities as we go forward. So that's it for me. I will stop sharing.
You. That was, well, I know we've spoken before, and you've given me an overview before, and I really wanted everybody else in the community to hear it, because it's such a outstanding piece of work that everybody's interested in. There's a few specific questions for you in the chat, which I wonder whether you could answer just by typing in.
Yeah, no problem.
But one that I think every single person on this call wants to know is, are you going to make the findings of this public so that we can all
yes so
look at what you've done?
Yeah, so that is something a lot of people have been asking us for, and yes, I will be doing that. I'm hoping in the next couple of months that we should be able to share that. So I'll be in touch. We'll make sure that we can make that available and get that information out to
That's
everybody.
fabulous, thank you.
Yeah.
And somebody's just asked about the slides as well. Are you able to share the slides?
Yeah, we can do that.
That's fabulous. Okay, for time's sake, I'm going to move on, but thank you again, Donna. And now we're going to hear from Lindsay from Edinburgh Napier about the work they've been doing integrating their systems. Ooh.
Thank you.
Yeah, Lindsay next, yeah.
Yep. Just share my screen, hopefully. So I'm Lindsay Ramage. I'm the Head of Research Governance at Edinburgh Napier University. We started our journey to have sort of some form of integrated research management system in 2015. I wasn't the lead of the project, but I was involved sort of from 2016 and up until the current time in sort of managing the system, but also supporting it and sort of be a point of contact in the university. Yeah, so in 2015, when the project started, we had a new research office structure put in place. At that time, there was no cross-university research management systems. Data was captured in lots of different ways, tools, formats, or not really at all in any coherent way. Each department in the university had their own processes, which were a bit different from everyone else's. One of the systems that we did have was ePrint repository for outputs, but academics weren't really engaging with that at the time. Our pre-award team were doing costings on Excel spreadsheets. Probably about a quarter of the university had access to web pages for researcher profiles. And as a result of this, we had really inconsistent processes across the university for costing applications and recording research outputs. And as a result of this, we had no way to monitor, report, or really properly share and disseminate our research and innovation activities. So there was a real need to have some form of research management system, and we really wanted something that could be integrated to make life a bit easier for us all. One of our main requirements that we wanted to have as a fairly small and not hugely research active university at the time was to make life easier for ourselves as much as possible. And what we ideally wanted was to have one system that would cover all the aspects that we were interested in at the time. So costing projects, outputs, having profiles and web presence for our researchers. We wanted this, hopefully, it might be more efficient, to have less integrations, but there would also be less staff support in the university, so to make things a bit more streamlined for us. And the idea is that we really wanted our academics to really engage in any system that we had, and we wanted them to be engaging with the system, inputting their own data, and the fewer systems for them to access would help that process. And one of the main drivers was to have consistent research processes and be able to report across the university in a coherent way. So when we went out to tender at the time, there was no real system available that would do exactly what we wanted. We had some responses that would maybe do the sort of projects management bit or the outputs management piece. But one of the suppliers worked out were sort of developing something that was more sort of end to end. They didn't necessarily have that product at the time, but the university decided that we were willing to work with the supplier to realise our aim of having an end-to-end one system that would do everything that we needed. So we started the journey in 2015, and in 2016 we were able to launch with our projects module, I guess, so pre and post award. And we did that in the spring, and then later on that year we introduced our outputs and profiles. And since that time we've added additional functionality and products as they have become available from the supplier. and some of those we were development partners and inputted what our user requirements might be, and other ones they would we sort of took the product as it became available, as it being developed elsewhere. It was quite clear that as we developed or introduced more parts of the system, that our requirements changed with the additional functionality and just greater use of the system. So one of the things that became much more important to us as we had the system was about the transparency about in the system, the academics, the researchers and the professional support teams were essentially seeing the same information at all times based on the permissions that they have to access different information. So that was really useful. Whereas other systems, there's maybe like a academic view and a support staff view. So that became quite important about sort of engaging with the academic body. We also found that we had new requirements that we hadn't thought of in the beginning. So that could be additional functionality within the products we had, but also we decided that things were quite working well, and we would want to incorporate other processes or activities with the product that we had. So later on, we were interested in having contracts management, ethics application management. And actually, as time has gone on, it's not just the sort of research office that's thinking we want more capability and we want more functionality. The academics have been coming to us and saying, wouldn't it be good if the system could do X, Y, and Z? And we've kind of fed that in to our processes and our requirements and fed that back to the supplier. During that time, since 2015, there have been changes in the sector requirements, and we've had to review our capabilities and our processes, which has changed our system needs and required us to need additional or improved functionality. So this is sort of a plan of our current situation. So within the WorkTribe product, we have the projects module, the contracts, we've got the profiles, we've got outputs, ethics, impact and ref. And each of these parts of the module will interact with each other and also our existing university systems. So things that you might expect like HR system and finance system and the research student system. We also use some of the data from staff time on projects to feed into the workload allocation system. We also have set up a spend commitment system from the project, so researchers can match their spending to the budget that's available in the project. And we also have all our data backed up into our data warehouse and our reporting tools. So the information from the staff profiles and the awarded projects within WorkTribe goes to our external web pages where we have profiles and also the institutional repository pages. Although when we started the journey in 2015, WorkTribe didn't have a product to do that, so we developed our own systems. But there is now a product available, so that might be something we might want to look at in the future. But we wanted to have something quite quickly, and we wanted to have something that fitted the university's marketing and branding at the time. So that's the approach we took. So the information within WorkTribe also will pull data from things like Crossref, and hopefully we're about to start a pilot project pulling in data from Publications Router, and then the usual repository data will feed to external sources such as DataCite, Core, and we also have staff profiles which are linked to research professional fingerprints so that academics can get tailored funding opportunities based on the information that is on their profile. So one of the, and obviously we've just gone through the ref cycle, so the information that we have in our ref module and impact case studies, we were able to import into the ref submission system using the JSON extract. So that's sort of an overview of everything we've got. Things are changing all the time, but that's our current situation. So we can integrate with university systems and external systems related to research management, but also within the system, each module has records that will link to other records in other modules in the system. So it's sort of integrating within the system. So each module will have basic forms for inputting the data, a document repository, and most parts of the system have a workflow for approval. So the academic creates the information, it goes to an approver in the relevant department or in the school or in the research office. The data is then checked and then it's approved to allow it to maneuver to the next stage in the process. Within the system, some parts are configurable via the admin function, but a lot of the product is sort of as it is provided to you as an institution, which in some ways is useful. And other ways, you kind of have to work around the product, but that would be the same for any product. And we're able to do searches and reporting on almost all of the data that is entered in the system. So the benefits for us in the university of having this system is the visibility of the data, that everyone can see the same information, the accessibility of the data. So academics are engaging with the system, and for the most part, they are inputting their data about themselves and their activities. Some of the workflows are more managed by the research office. So the contracts module is mostly managed by the contracts team, and the funding, there's the engagement with the project support teams, and likewise across the different system. But it seems to work for us in our situation. And just the one system for data entry is one of the main bonuses for us, because it's much easier to manage for the academics. Got some feedback from different people over the time on different parts of the system. They tend to find that they like the fact that they're just going to one place. Academics are able to update their own information, and some of the visibility and reporting for professional service staff and the school management find that very useful. So I think I'm probably just going to stop there now, just to give you an overview of what we have and where we're at. So it's maybe a bit more further developed than some of the other speakers that are sort of more at the beginning of their journey.
Lindsay, thank you very much. And I think it again shows, I think all three talks from universities have just shown how many different systems and people need to be involved when managing research systems and workflows and processes just within one institution. And it looks like a very successful project that you've got there. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yep, thank you.
Adam's going to talk about now how identifiers can play a central role in this issue.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry for crashing the talk earlier. Sorry, Lindsay, about that. So I was told I had a maximum of 10 minutes hard stare. So I'll try and whiz through that, especially because I also think that the kind of discussions are really important. I also noticed from Tamsin's slide that I needed to wear a tie, so I've just gone away and done that. I'm currently the product specialist for PIDS at JISC, but previous to that, I was a proper researcher working on bioinformatics and digital humanities, and then I ran the repositories and CRIS at University of Liverpool. So on top of all that, I just wanted to talk about kind of the underlying fabric of kind of the scholarly infrastructure, and a bit about how we can look at that as a way of pinning together all of these systems and kind of taking the advantages out of that. So this is a bit where there we go. So very briefly, this idea of connectivity and making sure all of our information is linked together is, way back. So Vannevar Bush wrote, as we may think, 1945. There was the MEMEX, Again, it's a great piece of work. You should go and read it if you haven't. In 1968, Ted did As We Will Think, and then later went on and did Computer-Lib Dream Machines. And in 68, Doug did the mother of all demos. It had links, it had webcams, it had live editing for everyone. And this idea about ensuring that information is deeply interconnected and deeply intertwined, either from Ted's point of view for that personal benefit of making sure that all the things that you're involved with are linked together, or from Doug's point of view about ensuring that community is bootstrapped, about making sure that that information for community and society is linked together for the public good. So then we went to the web. The web's a busted flush now. It's basically just, you know, silos, procedural generated stuff on cat memes. So what was underlying all of this stuff? It's about pointers and information. It's about bidirectional stuff. It's about having stuff that's persistent, and underlying all of it, a framework of connectivity, references. Xanadu had microtransactions, and kind of the value is in these pointers, these things that are persistent and identify, and the metadata with them. So I guess probably most of you are familiar with things like DOIs, and that DOI has those two things in it: that persistence, that kind of organizational structure that guarantees that it's something that's there for a while. It's not, you know, ephemeral. So a URL's not a PID because you don't know anything about the kind of underlying structure. That DOI.org is a guarantee that it'll be around for some time, right? It's persistent. And then that unique identifier tells you exactly and uniquely where that resource, that object is. But also there's this metadata, there's this thing underneath it that tells you about that. And all of these things together are really important. So, you know, we are like kind of talking about towards scholarly infrastructure. And what is science? I'm not, you know, it's all of these things. And we have, as a question asked earlier, in the kind of GIST project, which is moving on to the Research Identifiers National Coordinating Committee, the RINC. Talk some more about that later. These priority persistent identifiers, you know, thinking about the people who are involved, the institutions, the funding, the work itself, the processes for the work. Again, I'm just going to pick up this thing called a RAID, which actually captures the narrative of a project. And that's really useful, for example, for practice-based research. So you can bundle together all the different things that are involved in a kind of a long narrative flow. So it's something like not quite so STEMmy. I should also mention that we don't really have like a grant PID anymore. It's just another DOI. So that's, you know, kind of important. But as everyone else has said, it's quite complicated. Okay, so how do PIDs support good research? I mean, this is what I think really is important to focus on. It gives us better fabric. It gives us that kind of underlying kind of substrate, all right, of our science. It gives us a way to describe and pin our works. It gives us some work that we've been doing with ORCID especially, but that's flowed out to places like DataCite and Crossref. The latest DataCite scheme is great. To describe all of the different outputs that we have, not just the things from STEM, but, you know, like recordings, somebody standing on a street corner for half an hour as a piece of performance, that kind of thing. And again, we've asked that question about these priority PIDs. It gives us accessibility discovery. I'll come on to talk about fairness a bit. It gives us better connectedness. The metadata in each of those PIDs can include relationships to other PIDs, gives us these kind of interconnectedness, better policy, and better science. Now, whenever we have these persistent identifiers, what they do is in that metadata, they encapsulate information about, for example, these outputs. So, you know, reuse, not rekey. I think I heard that earlier. that gives us more time, right? And that time is not to do more research, it's to do better research. So what we're looking at is not, necessarily huge amounts of extra science, but better science coming out from researchers. And for example, we also get, better transparency. So UKRI, a global first, so they add the reviews for their funding into the ORCID records of the people who've done the reviewing. It's all anonymous stuff, but you get a credit for the reviews that you've done to the funding. And again, that's just a quick plug for RAID. So this is about the idea if you can actually, look at a research project from project point of view and include using these persistent identifiers, all the different things around it. So just, racing through these things. Persistent identifiers underpin better and more accessible research. If you've got a DOI on an output, it's a first class citizen in the scholarly infrastructure. It doesn't matter whether it's from a highly funded research institute in Berlin or whether it's from some small scientific research school in the middle of Africa. It doesn't matter whether it's from New Zealand or somebody in Peru. It's got a DOI, it's sitting in a registry, it's a first class citizen. They are open registries, it means that work is discoverable and accessible. PIDs promote fair data, so it allows your work to be findable, accessible, interoperable, etc. But also, I think importantly, as we come to look at global science, it allows us to observe the CARE principles as well. PIDs build better connections. These open registries have records of the, as I said before, the other persistent identifiers. ORCID are building up their affiliations. So I was recently at a webinar run by ORCID for consortia leads. So a third of records in the registry have some kind of affiliation. That's still 4 million unique identifiers for researchers. 90% of those are public. There's a thing in DataCite called the DataCite Commons, which is a project currently running. Many people think of like kind of Crossref for publications, DataCite for data. That's changing, and actually there's I think it's 18 DOI issuing registries at the moment. So we have this thing called the PID graph from DataCite, which links all of this kind of information together. We've got, that's the Crossref API and all the different things you can do with that. And that's something from something called the research graph. We have all of these different things providing connections and allowing us to pull data together. With our persistent identifiers, we can require better. So one of the things that's currently high in my brain is Plan S. I don't know if anyone else has heard of this thing, but it's about better and open. And in those technical specifications are the use of persistent identifiers for scholarly publications. And so one of the implications of that is that your author accepted manuscripts in your institutional repositories will have a PID if you're Plan S compliant. So that means that Greenaway happens with Plan S. ORCID ran the Orbit and Publisher Open Letter. So the Publisher Open Letter currently, I looked last night, had 112 publishers signed up, and that's over 7,000 journals, which are now accepting and using ORCIDs in their workflows. And we await the UKRI report on what it says about PIDs and how important they are. Reuse, not rekey. So finally, PIDs in your research workflows allow you to use reliable information. It should all be machine to machine, right? You should put it in once, preferably, from an authoritative source. So it, shouldn't really even be you typing it the first time around. The ORCIDs in your HESA report allow you, over the years of your HESA report, to discover the narratives, outcomes of your researchers. We recently, from the ORCID Consortium, ran workshop on the ref. And again, we had a lot of people discussing how they've used either the ORCID registry or some other persistent identifier stuff to pull out information for their ref submission. You can use persistent identifier information, pull stuff out of Crossref, pull stuff out of DataCite for your PDRs. You should be able to pull stuff out for funding or publication submissions. And again, as Anne helpfully mentioned at the start, we've been working on the impact of persistent identifiers in the UK. And there's this thing called the CBA, the cost benefit analysis, which is coming out on the 21st of June. It's under embargo until then, so I couldn't possibly speculate that it might demonstrate there's millions of pounds saved if you put persistent identifiers in your workflow and you reuse information that's captured by PIDs. And there's just a little reference there about how it's a thing from Ted Haberman about how you can actually improve persistent identifiers in a particular repository that he was working with. Just one quick thing again, just to be clear, it's really important to try and find a PID that already exists for your use case. XKCD is great. Okay, so thanks very much. The slides are all available on Zenodo. If you've got questions, stuff, just hit me up on Twitter. And you know, I am in ORCID, so I am a number. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. I'm not sure what my hard stare is meant to say to you, but consider it done. So yeah, we are running out of time, but I think it's been really interesting. I'm going to just show a few more slides. I think a lot of the questions that have been posed have been answered. There's a couple there for you, Adam, I think. Let's just go. Oh, no. How do I get out of this now? Okay. And so, yes, I was going to quickly run through what we're doing at JISC, although Adam has given us quite a good overview in the identifiers. We're part of, my role is head of product in Open Research Services. We have a vision of making outputs of research and the process and the management as open as possible, as early as possible, and accessible to everyone. But we're very aware that this goes beyond open access, and open research should be about working with integrity as well. And integrity is ensuring information is collected, stored safely and shared appropriately, and also that reporting is accurate and requires minimum time and investment to do it properly. So we do need build a shared infrastructure which works for everyone, whether it's open or not. My team, which Adam is a member, is informally called the Underpinning Infrastructure Team, and we are looking to promote and support an environment that permits digital research information and outputs to be shared seamlessly. And the services that are in our team are highly relevant to today's discussion. So we run, and Adam's part of running the UK ORCID Consortium, which provides reduced fees and technical community support to members. Publication Router takes information from content providers such as publishers and delivers them the metadata and sometimes the outputs as well into CRIS systems and repositories within universities. We're building a new generation research repository that's based on an open interoperability framework, and we are aiming for it to be the most interoperable research repository on the market. And this links into quiz systems and other research systems, and also our digital preservation services as well. And we've also got a new service called Research Systems Connect, which also uses this interoperability framework to help join up other research systems. So we don't supply a system in this respect. We provide the plumbing to join up other systems. And then, as Adam's indicated, we also do some advocacy work as well. We've got the PID work going on, and we're helping set up the Research Identifiers National Coordinating Committee, which is meeting soon. And other relevant work by just in this space includes is described in the strategy, which we'll provide a link to with the slides. So that's it with 3 minutes to go. So, but we can keep the discussion going beyond the end of this webinar. Do visit our research blog and our research pages. Sign up for research updates from our headlines email. I think comes out once a fortnight. And if you're interested in any of the services that have been mentioned, then contact us directly, or you can go via your JISC account manager. But yes, do use the hashtag on Twitter as well. I'm just going to have another look at the Q&A. To see if there's anything. I think there's just specific questions for Adam there and Donna. A couple of things in the chat. Has anybody got any questions? I was just wondering whether the panelists that are left, I think one of the things that's come up really is around advocacy and working with other people within the university. So I wonder if each of you could just give a tip for how you go around communicating with other stakeholders in your institutions. So maybe Sue, you.
Yeah, I would say it's not a one-size-fits-all model. It is, you've got to actually work out the best way to communicate with each particular group of stakeholders, because talking to your academic stakeholders is very different from talking to your finance stakeholders, for example. So my main tip is think about your collaboration techniques, which is what I was saying in the talk. You know, you are collaborating with people, and that is, you need to think about how you do that practically and technically.
Lindsay, do you have any thoughts on advocacy?
I don't think I've got much more to add. I think Sue's kind of covered that. I think it's sort of understanding how to communicate with different people and just keep up that communication. I think a lot of our communication might have been earlier in the process, but I still try and regularly keep in touch with everyone. And I find that they are now coming to me for my advice on their projects, whereas originally I was reaching out to them. So it's developing those relationships, finding out how to communicate with those people, and then just keep on top of that going forward.
Donna, have you got anything to add, or any from another aspect as well? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we found really useful, especially when we were talking with senior stakeholders, I think they had one sort of viewpoint of how these systems were working, but in reality, getting them in the room with the users of those systems was really important for us. I think they started to see, especially on one of our systems, we got students in the room and started to ask them how they were using it. And, you know, they were quite, you know, that they weren't that impressed with the way the system was working. And I think it was a real kind of difference between what the senior stakeholders thought and what they were thinking. And I think they started to realize, actually, yeah, maybe there are better ways of doing things. So I think getting people in a room and workshopping this stuff out as a group has been really, really insightful, actually, for us.
Lovely, thank you. Well, we are over time now. I need to thank all the speakers again for their input and such interesting and informative talks. Where we go next, maybe that's the next webinar. But it's been really interesting and really helpful, and I'm seeing some great comments coming up in the chat as well. So we'll get the slides together and we'll get them distributed. And then, as I say, yeah, keep in touch and let's keep talking. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.